Every country owes money. Every government runs on debt. Every generation inherits it. But stop for a moment and ask the question no one seems to answer. If every country on Earth is in debt, then who, exactly, is the creditor? Where does all this money come from? Who holds the world's IOUs? And how did humanity reach a point where debt became the oxygen of civilization itself? What you're about to hear isn't theory. It's history, hidden behind complex terms, polite language, and smiling politicians. This is the story of how debt became a product, how it turned from a burden into an industry, and how the world's money system quietly rewrote the meaning of wealth itself. Welcome to the story they never taught in economics class. Let's start with what we see on the surface. The modern world appears to function. Countries borrow, economies grow, and citizens spend. We hear phrases like national deficit, GDP growth, bonds, and fiscal policy. But beneath those numbers lies a single assumption, that debt equals wealth. Governments borrow to build, to wage wars, to pay pensions, to save banks, and to stimulate economies. And yet, despite record growth, the debt never disappears. In fact, it only grows. As of this moment, the world's total debt exceeds 320 trillion, more than 3 times global GDP. Every major economy, the United States, China, Japan, the Eurozone, runs on borrowed money. But if everyone is borrowing, if every government owes, then who is on the other side of the equation? Who lends to the lenders? To answer that, we need to go back to a time before money became what it is today. Long before banks or bonds, debt was simple. It was personal. A farmer borrowed grain from a neighbor and repaid after harvest. A merchant took silver to fund a voyage and repaid with profit. Debt was trust between people. But as trade expanded, so did the need for a universal medium of exchange. Kingdoms minted coins to simplify transactions, and temples began keeping ledgers, the earliest forms of accounting. Then, in ancient Mesopotamia and later in Rome, rulers discovered something extraordinary. By controlling the issuance of money, they could control the economy itself. Debts could be created or erased with the stroke of a pen. Empires began to run on state debt, promises backed not by gold, but by taxation and faith in power. And as centuries passed, that invisible system of credit became more valuable than gold itself. Fast forward to 17th century Europe, the birth of modern finance. Wars were expensive. Monarchs were desperate. To fund their empires, kings began borrowing from wealthy merchants and financiers. Powerful families like the Medicis, the Fuggers, and later the Rothschilds. But these financiers wanted something more stable than royal promises. They wanted institutionalized debt. In 1694, something revolutionary and dangerous was born, the Bank of England. It wasn't a royal treasury. It was a private institution created to lend money to the crown with interest. For the first time in history, a government became indebted to a central bank. The bank didn't lend gold it owned. It lent promises to pay gold. Paper receipts representing value that didn't yet exist. This was the birth of fractional reserve banking, the art of creating money from nothing but confidence. Soon, other nations followed: France, the Netherlands, America. Governments issued bonds, banks created credit, and citizens became the collateral. Debt was no longer a burden, it was a business model. By the 19th century, the world's financial map was drawn. The British pound ruled global trade, backed by colonial wealth and banking dominance. But as nations industrialized, they needed capital: railroads, factories, armies. Where did they find it? Banks. Commercial banks lent to governments. Central banks backed them. Investors bought government bonds. The money system became a loop, a debt machine feeding on itself. And the more a country borrowed, the more its economy appeared to grow. It was a perfect illusion. Debt created prosperity. Prosperity justified more debt. Then came the 20th century, the century when money itself stopped being real. In 1944, as World War II ended, the world gathered at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. There, delegates from 44 nations agreed on a new global system. The US dollar would become the world's reserve currency, backed by gold. For a while it worked, trade boomed, economies stabilized, but there was a problem no one could fix. The United States printed more dollars than it had gold to back them. By the late 1960s, other countries began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. The US faced a choice, either lose its gold or change the system. In 1971, President Richard Nixon made the historic announcement. The dollar would no longer be backed by gold. In that moment, money became pure debt. Every dollar in circulation was now a promise, an IOU, backed only by faith in the government that issued it. And because the US dollar was the global standard, the entire world economy became a system of debt-backed money. This was the turning point, when debt stopped being a problem and became the engine of the world. So, back to the question. If every country is in debt, who's the creditor? The answer isn't a single country or person. It's a system, a global network of central banks, investment funds, and private institutions that lend to governments and to each other. When you hear the US owes China, it's only half the story. Yes, nations buy each other's bonds, but the real lenders are the financial markets themselves. Central banks issue debt. Commercial banks multiply it. Investment firms, like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, hold trillions in government securities. Even pension funds and insurance companies rely on sovereign bonds to stay afloat. In short, the creditor is the system that creates and profits from debt. And at the center of it, all stands a group of institutions that no one votes for, yet everyone obeys: the central banks. Debt isn't just numbers on a screen, it's the shadow behind every crisis. Inflation, recessions, inequality, all are symptoms of a system designed to expand debt endlessly. Governments borrow to stimulate economies. Banks lend more to profit from interest. Citizens work harder to pay taxes that service those debts. And the cycle continues, silently transferring wealth upward. As the rich own the debt, the poor own the payments. Today, over 70% of all global wealth is tied to financial assets, not physical production. Money now earns more money than labor ever could. That's not an accident. It's design. Over the years, reformers have tried to break this pattern. Gold standards, debt jubilees, digital transparency. But each attempt has failed because the system's survival depends on growth. If debt stops expanding, economies collapse. If economies collapse, banks fail. If banks fail, governments fall. So the only solution is more debt. Every crisis, from 2008 to 2020, has been solved by printing more money, lowering interest rates, and pushing the next collapse further ahead. The world is running not on wealth, but on momentum, a race against its own mathematics. Look around. Debt has evolved. It's no longer physical, but digital. Trillions exist only as numbers on screens. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, are the next phase. Programmable money with total traceability. At the same time, private corporations have become bigger than countries. BlackRock manages assets worth over $10 trillion more than most nations' GDPs. And just like centuries ago, crises are still profitable. Every market crash transfers ownership from the many to the few. The empire of debt never ended. It simply changed form. 3 takeaways. First, debt isn't an accident. It's the foundation of modern money. Every dollar, euro, and yen is born as debt. Understanding that changes how we view growth. Second, the true creditor isn't a nation. It is the financial architecture that transcends borders. A self-reinforcing network of institutions that thrives on debt expansion. Third, freedom, economic or personal, depends on awareness. Because only when people understand the system can they stop feeding it unconsciously. There's a saying among economists: the modern world doesn't run on oil, it runs on debt. But oil can run out. Debt can't. It only grows until confidence collapses. And when that happens, money itself must be reinvented. Maybe through digital control, maybe through chaos. Either way, history tells us one truth. Every empire built on debt eventually meets its reckoning. The question is, when this one does, who will be left holding the bill? If this story made you question what you thought you knew about money, subscribe to the Fiscal Archivist. Because here we don't just tell financial stories. We uncover the hidden architecture of power, one secret at a time.